This week on Hometown Ghost Stories, Wotton-Under-Edge, a medieval market town in Gloucestershire, has seen centuries of bloodshed, plague, and war. But its most infamous site, the ancient Ram Inn, a 12th century former priest's house built on a pagan burial ground, with a history of child sacrifice, witch hunts, and alleged demonic activity. It's been called England's most haunted house. Some call it a portal to hell. Others, just another night in England's haunted history. This is Hometown Ghost Stories, the ancient Ram Inn, Wotton-Under-Edge.
Hometown Ghost Stories contains serious and often distressing events and is not intended for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
The winding dirt road leading to the inn was reduced to mud from the rain. The deep ruts from the wagon wheels were filled with brown water that rippled from the raindrops. Mary held her skirts up just high enough to not get too wet as she walked along the road, but the attempt was futile. She was soaked and filthy from her long walk. She didn't have a plan. All she knew was that she needed to get away from her husband. 12 years of marriage out the window. He'd been unfaithful, and she had caught him. Her fury had gotten the better of her, and she threw a hot pot of stew at him. The cast iron pot split his lip open, which threw him into a fury. Mary fled the house, but her husband was now falsely accusing her of witchcraft. This was a sure way for him to get out of the marriage and be rid of her. Great for him, but it wouldn't end well for Mary, so she was fleeing. The inn was her temporary idea until she could figure out how to get out of town for good. There were rumors about the inn that floated around town, rumors about strange happenings due to it all being built on old burial grounds or something like that. It wouldn't have been her ideal choice, but it would have to do. She pushed open the wooden door, and immediately, the heat from the hearth fire welcomed her with a comforting warmth. The tavern bustled with townfolk, laughing and gossiping, all indifferent to her troubles. She scanned the room trying to locate the innkeeper. She was hungry, but didn't want to linger too long, so as to not be recognized in case her husband came looking. She spotted the innkeeper leaning in the corner, smoking a pipe. She hurried over to him and asked for a room. "Only one available, but you don't want it," he said dismissively. "I need it," she retorted without a pause. "Last guest ran out in a panic shouting about ghosts or demons," he added. "I don't care, I can pay," Mary pleaded, and pushed a small silver coin into his palm. "This is too much," he said. But Mary just held out her hand for a room key. He handed her the key, and she marched up the stairs to the room. It was a small room. Just a single bed and small chair and table in the corner. More than enough to get her through the night. She sat on the bed and gazed out the window into the darkening cloud-covered sky. The clouds had turned from a drab gray to a deep dark blue now that the sun had set behind them. An hour or so went by when she decided she would sleep. She knelt down beside the bed, clasped her hands together, and began saying a prayer. About halfway through her prayer, she began to hear a second voice, whispering her words along with her. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She stopped short and stood up, spinning around trying to identify the source of the whispering that had stopped when she stopped praying. The room was empty, except for her and the furniture. The furniture that at that moment began to move. The chair in the corner began slowly sliding away from the table and spinning on its own. Mary was dumbfounded and immediately remembered the innkeeper's ominous warning earlier in the night. Just then, the door to her room burst open, filling the room with light. "There she is!" Her husband stood in the doorway with the constable. Mary began pleading. "I'm not a witch! You must believe me!" But the men weren't paying attention to her. Their focus was drawn to the corner of the room. The chair that had been spinning was now floating in midair, spinning faster and faster. "Witch!" the constable yelled and slapped the shackles on Mary's wrists. All Mary could do was hang her head in defeat. Who would believe her? I'm Jesse Wilkins, and this is Hometown Ghost Stories, the hauntings of the ancient Ram Inn, Wotton-Under-Edge, England. The first recorded mention of Wotton goes back to 940 AD, but people were here long before that. Just above the town, the remnants of an Iron Age fort whispers tales of ancient Britons carving out a life in the valley. In the name, Wood is Saxon for wood, Tun means village, so a place born from the forest, built by the hands of those who worked it. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Wotton had its moment. Thriving mills, busy markets, money changing hands. But unlike other industrial towns, it never fully surrendered to the Victorian age. No sprawling factories, no choking smog, it dodged the full force of modernization thanks to better transport links in Stroud and Dursley. The result? A town frozen in time. Its streets lined with medieval timber-framed houses, Jacobean gems, and regal Regency-era facades, standing as they have for centuries. Today, Wotton-Under-Edge is a living, breathing relic, modern enough to welcome visitors, old enough to make you feel like you've stepped into a history book. Drop by the Heritage Center and you'll find artifacts spanning millennia. Roman pottery, wartime ration books, pieces of the past that refuse to be forgotten. But let's rewind, way back. Before Romans, before Saxons, this land was already being shaped by human hands. The evidence? Prehistoric burial mounds scattered on the outskirts. Long barrows, round barrows, ancient reminders of people who lived and died here thousands of years ago. Later, the Romans left their mark. A villa at Wortley, pottery in Clay Bottom, the remains of another villa at Kingscole. Proof that even in the far reaches of their empire, they brought their roads, their architecture, and their wine. Then came the Middle Ages. Woodton became Wotton-Under-Edge, a market town under the watchful and often heavy-handed rule of the powerful Berkeley family. By 1253, Wotton had earned its borough status, and in 1384, Catherine Lady Berkeley's School was founded, one of those rare institutions that has somehow survived the centuries, still standing, still teaching. But what really put Wotton on the map? Wool. England's medieval economy ran on it, and Gloucestershire had its niche, producing the iconic red cloth that would eventually outfit the British Army. This wasn't just fabric, it was currency, a trade that filled the coffers of merchants and built grand churches and abbeys that still dot the landscape. The remains of Kingswood Abbey's gatehouse serve as a stone and mortar reminder that wealth once poured through this region like fine French wine. Then, as with all good things, the boom faded. The Industrial Revolution came knocking, but Wotton didn't answer. Unlike its neighbors, it never became a factory town. The wool industry shrank, weavers moved on, and by the Victorian era, Wotton had settled into its role as a quiet market town, a far cry from the economic powerhouse it had once been. But there's an upside. No industrial boom meant no industrial scars. While other towns bulldozed their past to make way for factories and railways, Wotton held on to its history. Georgian townhouses still stand alongside medieval structures, and even now, modern buildings blend seamlessly into the old world charm. The history of Wotton-Under-Edge isn't all happy stories of wool, wine, and picturesque landscapes. There's a dark side to this old town. Legends of demonic encounters, witches with unfinished business, and the occasional ghostly attack. Built in 1145, the ancient Ram Inn has seen it all. It started as a home for priests, then became a public house, and is now basically a horror movie set that you can actually walk through. But the story of the Ram Inn begins way before the first stone was laid. It doesn't just sit on any old patch of English soil. It perches, brooding, at the crossroad of two ley lines, one of which cuts straight through Stonehenge, that prehistoric enigma wrapped in rock and ritual. If you believe the legends, these ley lines are more than just imaginary lines on a map. They're veins of raw, pulsing energy, channeling something ancient and unseen. The ram was built over streams and wells, constantly lapped by underground waters, another supposed conductor of supernatural energy. And that's where things take a turn from eerie to downright sinister. Some say that when they redirected the streams to build the inn, the restless waters beneath opened something, a rift, a gateway, a dark portal yawning right under the inn. A place where the veil between worlds is just a little too thin, where something old and patient might just be watching. But it's not just the redirected streams that could be stirring up paranormal activity at the ram. Evidence suggests that the inn was also built on top of a 5,000-year-old pagan burial ground. Not exactly the kind of foundation you want under your bed at night. Now, you don't need to be an archaeologist or horror movie director to see where this is going. With a country this old, you could probably dig anywhere and find bones. But was this a simple burial or something darker? Human sacrifice, blood rituals, the kind of thing that makes even skeptics shift uncomfortably in their seats. Whether you buy into it or not, one thing is for sure. The ancient Ram Inn isn't just haunted by stories, it's got the literal bones to back them up. The building started as a property of St. Mary's Church, a humble beginning if you ignore the whole potentially housing slaves to build a nearby church part. Rumors swirl about the underground tunnels that used to link the two buildings. During the 1500s, when England was all about burning people at the stake for witchcraft, a woman sought refuge in one of the rooms at the ancient Ram Inn. It didn't end well for her. She was tracked down, dragged out, and burned at the stake. But if the stories are to be believed, she never really left. Her room is now known as the Witch's Room, and if you spend the night, don't be surprised if you wake up to an invisible presence breathing down your neck. She doesn't care much for the witch label, but she's been seen plenty of times, often gazing out the front window. She's not alone either. Her black cat and a couple of ghostly children thought to have been murdered here keep her company. Fast forward all the way to the 1960s, when the ancient Ram Inn had fallen into serious disrepair. It was a structural nightmare, sagging beams, rotting wood, and virtually sinking into the ground. The town was ready to demolish the building when a guy named John Humphreys stepped in to save it. He didn't want to see one of the oldest structures in the area being wiped out for good. He picked up the keys to this haunted hellhole and moved in with his wife and daughters. His first night? Let's just say the welcome party wasn't exactly warm. He claims that something angry, yanked him out of bed by the arm and dragged him across the room. And he had the bruises to prove it. But instead of packing his bags and never looking back, John dug in. He made the ancient Ram Inn his home and dedicated the rest of his life to preserving it. The hauntings only got worse. His entire family would experience some sort of paranormal activity literally every single night, from strange sounds and smells to sightings of full-bodied apparitions and physical attacks. Eventually, his wife packed up and left with the girls. They had experienced more in their short time there than many hoped to experience in a lifetime. But John wasn't ready to give up on his old home. It cost him his marriage and his family. But hey, priorities. John swore he found proof of satanic rituals in the inn, evidence of something unholy lingering in the walls. He spoke openly about demonic presences, claiming that not only an incubus, but also a succubus haunted the place, among a laundry list of other restless spirits. Over the years, he's uncovered some truly disturbing stuff. Other signs of devil worship, evidence of ritual sacrifice, and to top it all off, the skeletal remains of a woman and child beneath the staircase. Some of these bones were found with broken daggers, which according to John, were likely used in human sacrifices and snapped afterward to prevent their reuse. The former bar area holds a particularly grim feature, a hole in the floor marking what appears to be a makeshift grave. It's believed that many more graves lie beneath the floor, undisturbed. Dark shadow figures frequent the area, along with eerie, disembodied voices. If you wander into the barn, which was built in the 1800s, you'll meet another set of residents. One male spirit in particular has an eye for blonde women, often greeting them with an unwelcome touch. But if that's not enough, there's also a 7-foot-tall dark mass that likes to lurk in the entrance. It's aggressive towards men and has a habit of shoving those it doesn't like out of its space. Then there's the infamous Bishop's Room, which some say is the most haunted spot in the building. Once a resting place for visiting bishops, it now hosts their spirits, and none of them seem particularly friendly. Throw in a dark monk and even a Roman centurion casually walking through the walls, and you've got yourself quite a supernatural cocktail. The Roman centurion visited the local plumber one day as he was working on the bathroom at the Ram. He turned around and boom, the Roman on horseback rode right through the wall and reared his horse, scaring the plumber half to death. Finally, the attic, the last stop on this hellish tour. Once a bedroom for John's daughter, heavy dragging sounds echo across the floorboards, sometimes moving over the bishop's room below. Shadow figures linger in the corners, and unexplainable knocking reverberates through the walls. John's daughter claimed that in the night she would hear a heavy thump as if a body had hit the floor right next to her bed. This was followed by what sounded like a body being dragged across the floor. So what's the ancient Ram in? A haunted house? A portal to something darker? Or just an old building with a colorful past? Whatever it is, one thing's certain. This place has seen centuries of blood, fear, and things that go bump in the night. And if walls could talk, you'd probably wish they didn't. I'm Jesse Wilkins, and this is Hometown Ghost Stories. What is going on, folks? Welcome to Hometown Ghost Stories, episode number 156. Back over in England to Wotton-Under-Edge, talking about the ancient Ram Inn. I'm Jesse Wilkins, joined by Rob Coakley. Hello, Rob.
I am always terrified that you're going to cut the video short and write to us as I'm doing my warm-up stretches before we go live and my little dances. And everyone has to and is going to have to see that. So I'm glad you haven't done that yet. It's
a terrifying sight. Speaking of terrifying sights, we also have Dave. Hello, Dave.
Ooh.
Oh, there he is.
You're terrified.
Yes. Shout out to everybody hanging out in the live chat. Lots of donations came in even before the stream started, which is always just a wonderful thing to see. Brenda C. came in with 50 gifted Hometown Ghost Stories memberships. Lockwood and Company came in with 10. Another Vice came in with 50. Papa Squatch donated $25 in Super Chat. And happy resub day to Steph, Brenda, and Demon King. Thank you so much for all your generosity and welcome in. And if you got a gifted membership, make sure you say thank you. And what is going on live chat? Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this beautiful Tuesday evening.
It's great to know that 400% of our viewers are now members.
Yes, it is. It is amazing. It is. It is always a pleasure to see the little ghost next to everybody and all of their family members, and probably some people down at the local graveyard that don't even know they have YouTube channels that had to be created just for these memberships. So we're very thankful for that.
I think the extra memberships go to people who might not even be on the chat right now that have just ever been on the chat, because I got messages from people that I know. They're like, hey, I just got a gifted Hometown Ghost Stories membership and I haven't been on YouTube in like 2 months.
Like, it happens. But either way, they're out there. And if you are a member, you actually get, you get some exclusive emotes that you can drop in chat. And then you also get access to some of the behind the scenes stuff that we make memberships only. So there's also extra videos that you can watch if you are a member on YouTube. It's only $1. It's only $1. So if you didn't get gifted one, you could always sub. But if not, drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll read it out on the show. Always very appreciated. And it's one of the best ways to support the show. It really helps us grow and get found by other new listeners who can join. But without further ado, we're talking about...
Real quick, you can also join Patreon. And if you are a VIP member of Patreon, you get a t-shirt if you are a member for 3 straight months of being a VIP. But very important news on that. You need to be a VIP through July 1st. So it's April 1st coming up. Basically, that's when your cutoff point is. I'm not explaining this well. You need to be a VIP by April 1st through July 1st, and we're going to be sending out a shirt. After that, you'll get a Google Doc form that you have to fill out within a certain amount of time. We'll explain that more the closer we get to July. But if you want one of the VIP shirts, I highly suggest signing up now if you're not already signed up for it.
Exactly. If you're unfamiliar, basically we drop a limited edition shirt every year, and we send it out to the VIPs that have been VIPs long enough. So
yes,
we'll keep you posted on that. We'll post more information on Discord and get those sent out. Excited to see what we come up with this year. And we also have some new merch coming out. So keep an eye out on that. HometownGhostStories.com if you want to grab a t-shirt early. You can grab it anytime. Sometimes we'll send them out. Sometimes we'll fulfill your order.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we are talking about the Ancient Ram Inn, and it was very hard to try to fit all of the information into the opening part there because there are so many hauntings here, and it is such an old building, one of the oldest buildings that we've covered. If the numbers are correct, then it is approaching its 1,000-year anniversary. Now, this has been widely debated. A lot of these details in this story have been widely debated, and we'll kind of get into the skeptic side of things in a little bit. But regardless of the date that it was built, it's debated between 1100 to 1400. It's still really old. It's still older than most structures in most countries. So, and it is
that
like over in United States, right? For like it's built somewhere between 1775 and 2025.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty much 300-year window. Yeah.
Also, is it a ship of Theseus such situation?
What?
Do you not know the paradox of the ship of Theseus?
I didn't actually understand what you said, but now I understand what you said, and I still don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, so the ship of Theseus is basically a paradox question that people ask, where the ship Theseus still exists, but every single part of it has been replaced. Oh. So is it still the original? So is it still the ship of Theseus or not?
Right.
So is that Ancient Ram?
It wasn't all replaced at once. It was replaced incrementally over time.
Correct. But every single part's been replaced. And I'm not saying the Ancient Ram is, but I'm saying probably a majority of it has been replaced over time. So that's the other question.
I would say it looks like the original stone structure, because a lot of the walls in there are made out of stone. It's not all stucco and wood. So I would say a lot of it probably is original. But I mean, this place looks like it's in rough shape.
In the 1100s?
Well, you probably got to redo it, right, over time.
I'm joking.
But the stones can last. So the foundation definitely looks very old. I mean, this place looks like it's in pretty rough shape even years ago. I mean, I was watching investigations that dated back 10, 15 years, and it doesn't look much better today. This building is virtually sinking into the ground. It looks like it could collapse at any moment, but I mean, it's still on the list. I mean, let's start here. If all of the stories are true about all of the hauntings, this is the most haunted building in England by far. And I know a lot of buildings claim to be that. It seems like every time we cover a new episode, they claim to be the most haunted building in the country. We've dealt with it a ton of times. But this one, we'll start with if they're all true, absolutely. You have demons, you have poltergeists, you have full-bodied apparitions, you have attacks, you have EVPs, you have literally every single kind of haunting is happening inside this building, a portal to hell, right? Everything. It has everything. So if we take it all at face value, then this is one of the most haunted buildings to ever exist. And it could be. It's that old. It's seen so many things, right?
I'm surprised there isn't an architectural historian that could nail down whether it was built closer to 1100 or closer to 1400. There have to have been architectural advancements even over that 300-year period of time.
And it's probably hard to pinpoint because of how many times it's been remodeled over the centuries. So it must be a little bit difficult. We'll get into the skeptical side in a little bit. I did do some deep digging into that, but it doesn't change the fact that a building this old that was once a tavern potentially had slaves being housed there. Now that's been widely disputed, but they were allegedly used to build St. Mary's Church. So you have some bad energy there, obviously. Slavery bad always in
any situation. And then it was a home for priests for a little bit. Then it was an inn, a tavern, changed hands so many times over the years. I mean, you're talking about almost 1,000 years. It's really hard to pinpoint what sort of bad things happened when. Went through the witch trials in the 1500s where they were executing witches left and right. And there's a woman who was accused of being a witch who stayed here. That's more of a legend, but it could very well be true. We talked about this kind of when we were covering Salem, but also when we were covering Edinburgh and all these other places that had these witch trials. What happened in Salem was terrible. What happened overseas was times 1,000, right? They were just, they were burning witches left and right. And I think in American history, I think there's been one witch that was actually burned at the stake. Now, there was obviously multiple that were executed, but it was happening all the time over here in the UK. So
I think there was none over here.
I believe there was one, and I think that was Southern Gothic dropped an episode on it.
So if you want to hear about that, you can listen to, we dropped it on our feed on Monday. She wasn't technically burned at the stake, but she was burned. So go listen to that story about Battletown.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, but anyways, so how early do you want to go back on this story? So, I mean, it said that the building was built on pagan burial ground. They did find evidence of this. He found different items that would date back to that era. So let's start with the skeletons, right? Because the skeletons, that's the most exciting find. That's horrifying. What's that?
You said back to that era. I said what era?
Well, it depends on which one you want to talk about. So they found skeletal remains that were thousands of years old. They dated. So when they found these bones, basically in the 90s, a team of paranormal investigators were there, and they chose to dig. Why they chose to dig in the spot they chose to dig, I don't know. But I guess it was
they were looking for. They thought there was like another drop basement or cellar that had been covered up from what they had heard. So that's what they were looking for. And the owner had given them permission to dig up the basement looking for that. And that's not what they found.
Yeah. So I believe now here's the other thing is with the sources on this, every source tells a different story. Some say it was multiple children that were found. Most accounts that I found said that it was a woman and a child. And buried with those skeletons was pieces of a dagger, at least one dagger, might have been multiple, but this thing was broken into pieces. And the university, what was it? Let me make sure I get this right. Bristol, they had analyzed the dagger and they confirmed that it was an ancient ceremonial dagger. And the reason that would have been snapped was at the time when they were doing these pagan sacrifices, they would break the weapon that they used to sacrifice the people with so that it couldn't be used again. Now, whether that's a zombie coming back to get revenge or whether it's just not supposed to be, you're not supposed to dig up that dagger and use it for another sacrifice or for any other purpose. What they did at the time was they would snap those daggers. So they did date this weapon back to that time. Skeletal remains, they said, were at least thousands of years old. I don't know if they pinpointed exactly 5,000 years on that, but they also found a bunch of other items. There's a mummified cat just on display in this place.
That's pretty good.
Case.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was going to say if they sacrifices, if they're finding child skeletons and if that points towards a child sacrifice, that could also point towards evidence for the demonic, because the demon Moloch was the demon where you would sacrifice children to thousands of years ago. So that would all add up for the demonic energy there.
Right. And then there was also signs of devil worship here with some other items that they uncovered. And you had lots of animal remains that they believe could have also been sacrificed. And it just doesn't stop.
Did you read why the cat was in the wall, though? Like why there was a mummified cat in the wall?
No.
So allegedly back in the day, which, back in the day for this place is quite far back, it was considered good luck to put a mummified cat inside your walls for the house. I'm going to say it didn't work for this one.
Nope.
Nope, bad luck. Or
you know what reminds me of? Remember the gate?
Yeah.
When they accidentally buried the the pet in the portal to hell, and that was like the sacrifice that it needed to spawn all the demons. Just like, this place, meanwhile, is like a portal to hell. They accidentally put the cat sacrifice in the walls and unleashed all the demons.
Or did
Yeah,
they
so-
release it when they removed it? That's the other question.
Maybe.
It's so tough to pinpoint which haunting lines up with which ghost. There's so much that they claim is here. So it all started when they were building the well, I guess it probably started with the sacrifices, but fast forward, I don't know, 4,000 years. let's go forward here. So when they were building this inn, which started as it started to house the workers that were building St. Mary's, which is the church right across the street, they had to redirect streams underneath the building for whatever reason, probably so it didn't sink into the streams or whatever. And they think that could have opened up a portal. And they say that the redirecting water channels bad energy. This is a theory that goes not just in England, but all over the place. They think if you redirect water, then it's just a bad idea. And we've seen this before where spiritual activity will follow the waters, the energy, the ley lines is another thing. Apparently this is at an intersection of two ley lines, one of which cuts straight through Stonehenge, which is kind of a cool detail, not too far from this place. And if you believe in ley lines, a lot of people view it as kind of pseudoscience, but that's kind of what we deal with all the time, is a little bit of pseudoscience. But it is it's believed to be right at a crossroads.
Suedo, but that's fine. You can continue.
Suedo, yeah, very smooth. Chicago throwing $2 in super chat. Said back then kids died all the time, plague babies. That is true. But when they're buried next to a sacrificial dagger, that does raise alarms. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
I was saying not just from the plague. Children were dying at high rates.
Right. That's why people had 13, 14 kids, because they never knew how many were actually going to make it.
Yeah, hedging their bets.
Right, exactly. But it is widely believed that redirecting water will create hauntings. I think you have a big situation with that in, was it Chicago, where they completely changed the direction of one of the rivers or something like that. So this can happen. But that's another one. So they think there could be a portal to hell right underneath this thing. They have no idea how many graves are actually underneath this. If it's on a burial ground, obviously there would be a lot. There's lots of burial grounds actually in this Wotton area. So it's one of those stories where I don't really know where to start, because there's just so much. But, I guess you could start at where they built the building, right? Redirected the streams, pagan burial ground. It's just a recipe for disaster right from the start. And then you had all sorts of things happening here. You had alleged, and most of these are legends, so it's really hard to tie anything to any kind of historical text, but plenty of wars were fought around here. You had a fort at one time. You had accused witches being executed all over the place, but apparently this was a place where it would happen. I saw one account where they said executions would happen right outside of this building. So there's so many reasons for this place to be haunted, but we can go through more of them.
Executions used to be public events too, so it kind of makes sense that they'd have one at a place where there's lots of public gatherings, like a tavern.
Exactly. Yep. And then you had alleged murders that happened inside this building as well. So you had highwaymen who murdered somebody. You had a former innkeeper who was murdered. You have children who were allegedly murdered. There's just so many, and it's really hard to say, well, that probably didn't happen when it's been around for so long, So it is difficult. It's difficult to debunk any of this kind of stuff. But again,
I don't think it's that far-fetched to assume that murders happened.
Yeah.
Right.
But the actual stories are probably bended over time, right? So even if that witch story happened, the one that you talked about in the opener, I'm sure we're going to get into, but oral history becomes a game of telephone, where you still might get the end result where the witch gets killed, but everything leading up to it could have been just changed and adapted over time. But we don't know, because did you guys do this in school where you would start with one person that would have a message in your classroom, and you would pass it around the entire classroom till it got to the last student? And by the time you get there, there's some semblance of that message, but it's twisted quite a bit by the time it gets to the 26th or 27th person. Now we're talking about 5, 6, 7, 800 years of this story getting
you froze. But yeah, you're talking about
melded
the
and
telephone,
stuff. So
the telephone game.
Yeah.
You're back now. You're good. You were frozen for a second there, but yeah, that is the game of telephone. And yes, yeah, we've all experienced that. So you would imagine that some sort of telephone game happens when passing legends down from time to time. Now, I'm sure a lot of this stuff can be documented as part of history, but I'm sure a lot of it is just tales. And one of those is, and we can hop into it, is the tale of the woman who does not like being called a witch. I don't think she was a witch, but she was accused of witchcraft. And excuse me, apparently she sought refuge at the Ancient Ram, which at that time it was just called the Ram Inn, which is a terrible name for a place. Don't call it a Ram Inn. That just sounds awful. But the Ancient Ram Inn, that we'll refer to it as. And apparently she sought refuge here. I think she was here for a couple of days. And then apparently the constable or whoever was doing the policing, I don't know, would it just be knights? I think it was a constable, right? I think constables were established around like 1200 or something like that. So it could have been a constable. But either way, they rounded.
You think that the Ram Inn is just a little worse than the Ancient Ram Inn? I think we still have the same problem with that.
We do.
Especially since we're dealing with an incubus in this place.
But even with a ram, like a ram is like the skull of a ram is kind of like a sign of the demonic anyways. Everything about this place was just like, let's make sure we build the most haunted building of all time. Let's see how many things we can do wrong here when building this place. Let's redirect the streams, build it over a burial ground, call it the Ram Inn, hang a ram skull over the fireplace.
It would be pretty weird if they built it and then immediately called it the Ancient Ram Inn.
Right. Yeah, you don't just build a place and call it a historical site.
Oh my God, we have to do that. We have to build our own haunted house.
Call it the oldest haunted house in the block.
Yes. But everything's brand new.
It's ancient.
I like it. But so, I mean, the legend goes that this lady hid out inside the inn for a few days, and then she got found, dragged out, and burned at the stake close by. They say it was in town, but we don't have any documentation of this happening. But there's plenty of history that says that this was happening all the time around this time. So very well could have happened. But now we have her ghost. So her ghost haunts the room that they have called the witch's room, which is a little bit.
Since she likes that, I'm glad that's what we call that room.
Yeah.
Probably not the best room, best name to call it, but it's also supposed to be haunted by her cat. So there's a cat as well.
I wonder if her cat is the mummified cat.
Yeah, I don't know. I doubt it, but it definitely falls in line with the tale, right?
I've also heard this story both ways, that it could be her cat or it might have nothing to do with her.
I think it probably has nothing to do with her. I don't know. You said the mummified cat is still there.
Yeah, they have it in a glass case. Last time I saw, anyways.
I don't know if 1500. We're talking 500 years ago now.
I don't know. It's mummified, so who knows how? It doesn't look good.
But was it? I mean, if it was like professionally embalmed, maybe. But I doubt that's the case.
By the looks of it, I would say no. So I did include an image of it, but let me pull it up for people who might have missed that. Mummified cat, ancient Ram Inn.
Well, you're pulling that up. Have you seen people that taxidermy their pets after they pass away?
Yeah, they always look hilarious. I think we have a whole Discord channel dedicated to bad taxidermy.
we did at some point, yeah. But it's always creeped me out. There's been a few houses I've gone to that the pets are taxidermied, and they're just like sitting there, and I'm just like, dude, this is weird. I don't like this at all. Let's not do this.
Yeah, I don't know if this is against YouTube's rules, but we're going to go for it anyways. But here is what we're looking at here. Not great.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. That is
Jesus is in that picture, Dave.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. There he is. They found him.
It's not a point and click adventure game.
But yeah, so they have that. As far as I know, it's still displayed in the inn. So it is something that they found. I believe they found it within the walls. But her cat is said to haunt this place.
It must have scared the shit out of whoever found it in the wall.
Not something you want to come across. Yeah.
Imagine you're just doing some renovation. You open the wall and that thing falls out.
That would be hard. That's like second to worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is the fact that they found human remains as well. Everything's bad. But I watched a bunch of investigations today on this place, and all of them caught really cool evidence. But one of them was a very clear EVP of a cat meowing, and there was no cats in that building. And I was like, wow, if this is legit, this is insanely good evidence. So
Well,
Class A
Class
EVP.
cat's not dead yet.
Maybe, yeah, it could just be still
Rough
meowing
shape.
down there. And so there's that, and then people claim to see the cat sometimes and hear it purring, or another one is they catch it the sound of it scratching at the door or pawing at the door. So that was the sound that animals will make. And I mean, a lot
Dave's
of
house while he's recording audio. Just
exactly this cat always barging in. But a lot of sounds that you would get during an investigation that you might equate to a ghost cat could very well just be rodents in an old building, right? You getting scratching, that could easily be mice or rats or whatever. But the meow that you're catching, unless there's a cat hiding out somewhere in there, that was pretty cool evidence. And that was inside what they call the witch's room. And there's other ones. There are some terrifying hauntings with this place. And there's people who have spotted the woman, the ghost of the woman, and all of them say that looks like she has burns from head to toe. So it's pretty obvious who that might be, right? And then other accounts, they've caught her looking out the window, and there's been quite a few photos of what looks like someone peering out the window. And in that window, if I'm thinking of the right one, there are two candles, and there's one where it looks like it's like kind of leaning in front of the candles and looking out the window. So there's a lot of really cool evidence. I encourage everybody hop on YouTube or wherever and check out investigations of this place, because there's some really, really good evidence that people have caught here. Very cool stuff. And then you also have they have the men's kitchen. That's what they kind of call the common area. But there's been reports of babies crying. So you have crying babies down there.
What is in a men's kitchen? Let's figure that out real quick.
Pots, pans, whiskey,
yeah,
cigarettes.
Is it strictly a grill situation? There's no oven.
Yeah.
We're just
grill, football on TV.
just indoor grilling. Let's see. What else could there be?
Maxim
arcade machine. Oh, definitely.
Remember those?
The entire year subscription in 2006 of Maxim just strewn about the entire room.
Yep, absolutely. But you're in England, so probably a tea set and some crumpets, biscuits, those kinds of things. But there's also reports of in the same room you have
Manchester United glass.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
Unless that's not where they like Manchester United, and we just ruined it. We're gonna get hate mail now because we said the wrong soccer team, and I said soccer.
We know nothing about soccer. We are Americans, so we fully are aware that soccer is great and it's the most popular sport in the entire world.
We know it's boring. We that's what we know. We know.
Dude, I have a curse. And that is anytime I actually watch a soccer game, no goals ever get scored. None.
Because they never do, Jesse.
No, they do.
That's the real haunting in England.
I've heard that goals sometimes get scored in soccer, but when I watch it never happens. So yeah, it never happens. I don't know. I've watched World Cup games, no goals. Never. Or I'll miss it. I'll go to the bathroom, I'll come back, and then a goal got scored. And I was like, great. Yeah.
If a goal gets scored in a soccer game and no one's around to hear it, does it really get scored?
Yeah, it's a legend like a lot of these tales at the Rams Inn.
Well, here's a service I could provide. If your team is winning and you want them to hold on to that lead, just call me up and tell me to watch the game, and then no goals will be scored the rest of the game. Boom, guaranteed victory. $400 an hour. I don't know. I'm just throwing out a number. That could work for me.
I'm in. But let me know you're doing that so that I can go place a bet on.
People in Europe right now are like, what the hell is soccer?
Never heard of such a thing. So the same area, you also have a lady in blue. So we have one of those. I feel like we need to add a lady in blue to the bingo card because it's been popping up more and more.
Lady in color, like lady and
is white a color though? White is the absence of color, isn't it?
Oh my God. Are we going to do this right now?
We're getting real philosophical here on this episode.
Black is the absence of color. White is the inclusion of all colors.
It just feels like it should be the other way around.
It does, but it's not.
You know what I base that off of is like a blank sheet of paper. And if I look at a blank sheet of paper, it's because we haven't added any color to it yet. But if a black piece of paper, if you use all the markers, it'll come closer to that color. Anyways, we'll move on. This is the This is the least interesting conversation we've ever had. So Lady in Blue, they believe her name is Elizabeth, and they believe that this is the woman who was murdered by highwaymen, and she haunts the kitchen. So
I'm just gonna pin this comment. Just leave it up here the whole episode.
Please, yes. So you had this guy, his name was Phil Jones. He's a ghost hunter, and he was doing a spirit board session in the men's kitchen when one of his team members froze up, and she froze up so bad she couldn't walk. They had to lift her up and carry her out as if she was like a wooden chair. It's funny to think about, but it's not funny if you experience that, because that is terrifying. But they said as that was happening, the room got way colder and the atmosphere changed to a point where everybody that was in there for that part of the investigation noticed it. And they believe that they may have contacted a spirit named Michael. And this guy was telling them that he had done a lot of nasty things. So they think that he could have been one of Elizabeth's killers. That was all inside the men's kitchen.
I am praying that Dave freezes up like that at an investigation and we have to carry him out like a wooden chair.
We have to go out and just set up an IV drip with whiskey in it and come on, get back to life, Dave. Come on.
I'm praying Rob stops freezing up like that in this episode.
You're the one freezing up for me in the episode.
We're both freezing up. I think I'm the only one that's been in the clear, but tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know. Anyways, so the most haunted room in the Ancient Ram Inn is said to be the Bishop's Room. And this one, it keeps getting better and better. So it's gotten to a point where now John, I don't even know if he's alive anymore, to be honest. He looked rough.
He's not.
He's not. Okay. He was very old. So bought the place back in the 60s. He was there for a long time. He dedicated his life to this place. And I believe his daughter took over. I don't know if she still owns the place, but he was passed on to one of his daughters. But even his grandkids were witnessing hauntings in this building as well. But he had this ritual because this was his bedroom for a while. So he slept in the Bishop's room. And he had a ritual before going into the room where he would take like a crook and he would rap 3 times on the door to like announce his arrival. And then he would go in, and every time he entered, he would do the sign of the cross. And this seemed to calm things down, because otherwise it was just all hell would break loose in this house. They said like if he didn't do that ritual, he would be woken up almost every night by the door just rattling violently. And so we started doing that ritual, and it really calmed things down. But there was one paranormal team who did what I wouldn't recommend. I don't really know the reason for this, but there's 3 beds inside the Bishop's room, and there's one paranormal team who was investigating, and they just took knives and stabbed holes in the beds.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. But it was mentioned in like multiple documentaries, but I never really heard a good reason why they did that. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, that just sounds like straight vandalism. But
yeah, what do we do?
I don't know. It's mentioned, but you've had, and I was watching during another investigation, they had EVP evidence of what's really sounded like chains rattling, which is interesting. And you think of maybe back to the witch's bedroom, which I believe is right above it. When she got arrested, you would assume maybe they took her out in shackles, and maybe you're hearing the sounds of the chains rattling from that, but who knows? Could be any other thing as well. So they say that people who stay in the Bishop's room, when it was an active inn, they would flee in the middle of the night. They would be running from that room from the amount of paranormal activity inside the Bishop's room. So it is pretty wild. It's pretty wild in there. There's a story from a former innkeeper who was murdered there. He had his head shoved into the fireplace, and that's how he died in the Bishop's room. And it's said that his screams can still be heard to this day. So that's something people hear, is screams from the fireplace. That's another one where I don't know if there's documentation on that, but that's a rough way to go. Wouldn't want that to happen for me.
Scary haunting too.
Yeah. Scream. Any screaming haunting is always wild. Absolutely. And there was another really cool piece of evidence, I believe, from the same investigation as the chains rattling EVP, where they were doing a Ouija board session. And these ones I'm always skeptical about, but if you look at it, like they all put like one finger on, I think it was just upside down shot glass, and the shot glass just goes shooting out from under them. And you got a really, really zoomed in look. And it was really obvious that none of them actually flung that shot glass, because all their fingers were just on top of it. So I thought it was actually a pretty solid piece of evidence. Normally any Ouija board evidence I see, I'm like quick to debunk, or at least internally, I'm like, I just don't believe that no one's pushing it, because you can't tell if someone is actually pushing this thing around subconsciously or not. So I really find it hard to count any Ouija board evidence as real unless it's from someone that I trust that tells me about it. We have never had any luck whatsoever with the Ouija board. Kate's watching, so we've never used a Ouija board, which is why we never had luck. So that'll be on the record as that. But that is the bishop's room, and this is where it gets real crazy. According to John, and this is from exactly what he said during an interview, he said that 10 people who have visited the bishop room, which it might be more now, at least 10 people later had to go and get an exorcism because of what happened to them inside of the bishop's room. So again, if we're taking this at face value, 10 people getting possessed by something potentially demonic is outrageous for one location. Absolutely outrageous. They had one bishop who came by and did an exorcism on the place. He's like, this is the most evil place I've ever been. I'm not doing this. He left.
Thanks.
So,
Yeah. I have questions about that, though, because 10 people are being possessed. When they get exorcised, is it just going back to the inn? Is it different entities that are possessing them? That's what I would. That it feels.
You cut out. It does feel like a lot
in that sense that we just don't have enough.
Whoa, your internet's going crazy, Rob. I don't know if you can hear me, but what you're saying is legit. Yeah. It seems like too much. Where do the demons go? Do they just go back? Like, all right, fine, I'll go find another person in the bishop's room. I don't know. I don't really know. So. But there's been shadow figures seen traveling through the room, and the most common description of these shadow figures is that it stops in the center of the room. I don't know what the significance of that is.
There's a lot of evidence for there being a demonic presence there. There's people report the smell of sulfur, the smell of burning flesh. Those are all things that are associated with demonic hauntings. And if there was child sacrifice down there, it could be tied to that, like I mentioned earlier. So it could be one demonic presence that has possessed 10 people over the years. I would guess more likely it's fewer than that, and other people are experiencing other things, but it's definitely possible.
Right. If it was going to be anywhere, it would be at a place like this or other locations where a lot of violent crime could have happened, like prisons and stuff. I think those could be there. But when you tie it into the burial ground and the human remains, the animal sacrifice, all of these other things are just recipe for disaster. So it could be any of those, really. And I've also seen a bunch of equipment malfunctions in this room. There's no doubt that the bishop's room is very haunted. Is the most haunted spot in this inn. It seems to have the most evidence. And if any of those exorcisms are legit, or any of those possessions are legit, then I would say absolutely this is the most haunted room in the place. So according to John's grandson, Mark Alway, he actually witnessed the incubus. And he gave way less details than I would have liked, but he was having a drink with John and they started to hear some noises. So they walked over to the stairs and claimed that there on the staircase was the incubus. He said it was the most terrifying thing he's ever seen. I would love a little description of what you saw there, Mr. Mark, but maybe he's given more details to other people. In the interview I saw with him, that was it. So you get a lot here. You get a lot. You also had, I'm trying to find my notes on it, but Caroline was the daughter. And so she was like 7 years old when she first moved in there. And I don't think she in particular experienced many hauntings. I think most of the ghost stories that she heard were just from her daughter. I mean, she didn't have a daughter at 7 years old. Wild, I know. From her sisters. And then her mother also had ghost stories, ghostly encounters, and her father obviously had a ton of them. So he was experiencing lots of them. But so she never really experienced anything personally when she first lived there. Now in her 30s, she ended up moving back into the house for a short period of time. And this was when she became convinced that it was real. So she was in the attic and she started hearing noises and she thought it was her dog, like that he got trapped beneath, behind some boxes or something, but she heard what sounded like her dog. So they started going downstairs and they found a cabinet that had gotten stuck in the doorway. And then items began tumbling down the stairs, which included some tarot cards that she brought and a bunch of books. And it seemed like, I think all of these items were kind of tied to supernatural stuff. So tarot cards went down. I guess there was 3 different cards that were really banged up in particular. And it was like the 3 of this, the 3 of that. I'm not familiar with tarot cards, so forgive me, but 3 cards in particular, both with the name 3 on them. Those were damaged pretty heavily, seemed to have some sort of significance. but something had pushed the cupboard down the attic stairs, and that takes a lot of energy to do. So they believe that this was poltergeist activity. So now we have demons, we have full-bodied apparitions, and now we also have poltergeists. So it was that's an event that we saw that at the Black Monk of Pontefract case, where something, I think was a clock that was a grandfather clock or grandmother clock or something along those lines, had gotten thrown down the stairs. It takes a lot of force to do that. So if that story is real and she seemed pretty credible, then I would say that is a terrifying amount of force from something supernatural potentially. And also the significance of tarot cards and books on the paranormal that were tumbling down the stairs. It seems deliberate.
It does seem deliberate. Now, you mentioned it could have been poltergeist and demonic. Most things that happen during poltergeist hauntings can also happen during demonic hauntings. So it is possible it is just a demon.
Right.
Just a demon. No big deal.
That's it. Don't worry about it.
Just a singular demon.
Just one.
So let's go down a very vague list here. Before we go too long here, I do want to get into some of the skepticism of this place. But
Can I ask you a question about the incubus haunting first?
sure.
Did you hear anything about the incubus attacking John and some of the horrific things that happened to him, that like stuff that I don't want to get into?
Succubus.
No, it was an
Both.
incubus. It's
Incubus.
both there, but it was an incubus that attacked him.
Yeah, so for people who are familiar with these things, we won't go too far into it because we are a PG-13 show, but they are sexual demons and they will do things to you in your sleep. So I do wonder how much
the line for me.
Yeah. We like hauntings, but leave me alone.
I didn't hear anything about an incubus. I heard about the succubus demon that would attack him.
Well,
Him in particular, I'm not sure. I did hear the succubus stories, but there are many stories of both of these things haunting the place. So let's go down the list. Haunting this building. And this is just a short list. It could be much bigger. You have an incubus. You have a succubus. We have benign spirits, lighthearted spirits. You have the giggling children. Who knows how many children are haunting this place? You have multiple spirits in the barn, including a 7-foot-tall shadow figure. And this sometimes appears in the form of mist. And I saw one picture that was pretty damn creepy. And this mist that they captured had a face. And that's pretty scary stuff. So sometimes that has a face. You have the...
Not Dave, though. Dave's never appeared as a 7-foot anything.
You don't know that.
You had the woman who was accused of being a witch, but her burned ghost is seen. You also have a hanged witch. I'm sorry, not a witch. You have a hanged woman. Could be a witch. But you had this... I don't know what again, there are so many sources that get all these stories completely different, but apparently a lot of times they would just be like, oh my God, there's the hanging woman again. It would just be hanging from a different beam inside the house on a different floor each time. Anyways, you have that. You have the Roman centurion, which is hilarious, but probably terrifying to see. So you have this dude on horseback that just will ride through walls, scared the hell out of the plumber one day. That's a wild story. You have a poltergeist. You have the priests that are haunting. And then you also have the ghost of a dark monk, which I believe this is the second week in a row that we're dealing with the ghost of a monk. Mm-hmm. So that's just roughly about 15 ghosts and demons that I listed there. And every time I do any research on this place, I hear about so many more. So if this is true, this very well could be the most haunted building in the entire world.
It could. So many. It still could all just be one or two demons.
Right. Yeah, and it could be mimicking and taking the form of other things. So
I think we have to send Dave there by himself to figure out how many demons there are.
I'll bring my demon counter, my demon calculator.
You had one account, which I don't want to discount it because it could be real, but there was a woman who was she was standing in the bishop's room, I believe, and she got tossed onto the bed. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's a demonic attack. But if I were going to fake, and I'm not saying she faked it, but if I were going to fake it, landing on a soft bed would probably be the,
could be the way to go, right?
That's the best ghost attack you can fake, right?
Yeah. So, if she jumped head first into the fireplace, we'd be a little more alarmed.
Oh man, yeah, that'd be wild. Is it too good to be true? That's the main question. Is it too good to be true?
Yeah, I think that. I'd want to go for myself to experience it. And I've seen both sides of the fence on this, where there are investigators that have gone there multiple times that have gotten nothing, But we know that just because you go somewhere doesn't guarantee that there's going to be activity that particular day. I don't care if it is the most haunted place on the planet at all. You just don't get 24/7 hauntings anywhere. So, and then there's people that claim that they get stuff every time they go there. So it's just like, this really rides both ends of the spectrum for what people are getting when they go there.
Right. So here is the skeptical side. And this is kind of a brief summary of a longer article. I'll link it in the show notes on the skeptical side if you're into that kind of stuff. So the Fun Police, they say that first off, St. Mary's Church is supposedly connected to, didn't exist in the 12th century. The earliest part of the Ram Inn date back to the 13th century, meaning the timeline is already off. And as for the ancient ram itself, the actual structure, according to historical records, wasn't built until 1495 to 1496. That's more than 300 years later than what the ghost blogs will tell you. And the vicarage story, also shaky. There was a property transfer in 1350, but there's no evidence that masons, vicars, or anyone particularly churchy lived there. By the 16th century, it seems to have been home to cloth makers, hardly the stuff of medieval clergy lore. As for the infamous pagan burial ground, that's the real kicker. If there were a burial site under the ancient Ram Inn, archaeologists would have found something, bones, artifacts, anything. Despite all the digging, both literal and metaphorical, there's not a shred of hard evidence to back up the claim. No records, no archaeological reports, just a story that's been repeated so many times that has taken a life of its own. So what are we left with? A 15th century building that likely started as a textile workshop, morphed into a church house by the 1530s, and by 1820 had settled into its role as a classic English pub, serving pints to locals until it shut down in the 1960s. Then John Humphreys came along, and whether you buy into the ghost stories or not, one thing's certain, he turned the ancient Ram Inn into something bigger than just a crumbling old building. He made it a legend. And legends, as we know, don't need facts. They just need people willing to believe. What a bummer. But yeah. I don't believe a lot of these things because according to Bristol, I mean, they dated this dagger back thousands of years. You have literal human remains being dug up here. Mm-hmm. Those apparently dated back a couple thousand years. So I don't know. I don't know if I fully believe this massive debunking. And metaphorical digging, I think, would be digging into the past. But I mean, they weren't
digging into history.
Right. So whether or not, I guess you'd have to look at some of the items that John found and do some actual dating on them. But it seems like they did do their due diligence on some of these things.
It's kind of a lazy debunking in the sense that they're basically just saying there's no historical evidence or there's no documentation of it. And if we're talking about the 11th and 12th century, then I think the fact there isn't historical documentation on it doesn't necessarily prove that some things didn't happen.
Yeah, and he's not really proving much, or she, I don't know who wrote this article, but they're not really proving much by saying not a shred of evidence was found. Well, you found a whole bunch of stuff. You have a mummified cat. That's scary stuff. And you found they legitimately found human remains. Those got turned over to the police. The police never gave them back. But the dagger was dated back.
Mm-hmm. If I find human remains, the police better give it back to me.
Yeah, hey.
Here's your corpse. Like, thank you.
I don't know what they were expecting, but maybe they wanted to maybe they wanted to pass it along to other people to do further studies on it. But I'm not entirely sure what the results of the bones were. But I do know that the dagger was dated back to ancient times. So you have an ancient dagger.
Okay, so the dagger existed,
right?
The skeleton.
So there is some hard evidence here. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe this debunking was written before they found more of this stuff. But I mean, the stuff was found in the 90s, and this is, I don't know.
Did we mention that the team that found the bodies got into a car accident on the ride home that night as well?
No, we didn't mention that.
Yeah, that happened as well. Same night that they dug those bodies up with the fragments of the dagger, that team also got into a car accident that evening.
Oh, there's too much at this place. Probably could have put it into a multi-part episode. But I mean, it's a lot of the history is just based on legends, so we don't really know. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say a building this old is probably haunted. Are all of these ghost stories real? It seems too good to be true. If demonic attacks and poltergeist attacks and incubus and succubus and all these horrible things that are happening there, if you consider that good, but too good to be true in the terms of paranormal enthusiasm, right? Where we would say that for all of these things to be haunting this place. And they say that, and they don't put an actual number on it. Another interview with John where he says it could be any amount of spirits. I don't know how many spirits actually haunt this place. Everybody asks that question, right? How many ghosts do you have? He's not like, oh, I have 13. Here's the names. He kind of leaves it open.
Yeah, as you should. For that much history.
He's a character. I will say that. So go watch some interviews with John because he's an entertaining guy.
Absolutely. I'm going to lead towards it's probably haunted. We probably don't know everything that happened there. There's probably legends that aren't true. But you mix all that up, and just because you can debunk some of the hauntings, or even if you couldn't, doesn't mean that stuff didn't happen in a building that is at worst 600 years old, 700, 800 years old. Like we just don't know everything that happened.
Still at least 3 times older than any building in our country, right?
Right.
So it is an old building, regardless if it was built in 1495 or 1100 or whatever they were saying. It is a very old building that has certainly seen its fair share of tragedy and bloodshed and has every reason to be haunted. And then if you buy into the ley line stuff and the redirecting of water stuff and the pagan burial ground stuff, it's just, there's every reason for this place to be haunted.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think. Do you think that the story is legitimate? Do you think it is just, was John just hyping this place up to make a buck? I don't know. He let his entire life fall apart by sticking around and continuing to put his life into that building. So yeah, he made the sacrifice. I don't know. It's I would not have abandoned my family to do such a thing, but I do love when people save and restore historic buildings, because the last thing we want is that to be replaced by, I don't know, a Walgreens or something like that.
Yeah.
That happened in my town. The old Toll House cookie building. I mean, it burnt down, but now there's a Walgreens there.
And a Wendy's.
And
I think they serve cookies, so full circle.
Look at that. Preserving history. They still have the sign out there, though.
They do still have the sign out there.
Right.
I'm worried about that happening to the Oliver House, because I don't know what's going on with that place right now. I need to find some more stuff out with that location.
Yeah, I just talked to Liz yesterday, and she was...
You did it, Dave. You said yesterday.
Yesterday.
We talked about that with the Boston accents last week.
That's right. Yeah, and she was just talking about how it's closed down. They have no idea whether it's going to open back up to the public for paranormal investigations, but it seems to not be the case just because the town is being stupid about it.
Which is so stupid, because they do paranormal investigations at the town hall in that town. Like,
yeah, more for us, less for you.
What is, like, I don't know. I'm writing somebody. Maybe the Wendy's. I don't know. Somebody.
That just means Rob's going to go through the drive-thru at Wendy's. Save the Oliver House. I'll take a number 4.
Yes.
Anyways, so that is the Ancient Ram Inn. When we do the English tour, which we will do, if it is somehow still standing, now it stood for a long time. It just looks like it's in really rough shape. But if the wind doesn't blow this place over, when we get to England, I would love to go here, because I would like to take a trip to Stonehenge anyways, which seems like it's relatively close. So it seems like it would be right along the way, or close enough, or I don't care. England is a pretty small country. We'll make the trip. But yeah, add this to the list of places to visit next time we are across the pond. And,
this comment says, wow, a group of guys from Massachusetts and not a single Moxie in sight. I don't think I've ever seen a Moxie in person. Is that a Massachusetts thing?
It is a Massachusetts thing. They do still exist in the grocery stores, but I would assume that the ones that are in the grocery stores have been on the shelves for 30 years, because nobody in Massachusetts or anywhere has bought a Moxie in the last 30 years. I think I've had it once, and it's not good.
Yeah.
Unless you endorse us, unless you want to sponsor us, Moxie, and then I will tell you how good Moxie is for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'm drinking a Chai Forest Sparkling. It's like, I don't know, some kind of...
Nice.
It's terrible. Unless they want to sponsor us, then it's great. I have so many of these too. We got them from Costco. I was like, I'll try these. Terrible mistake. Now I have to drink 36 of them. It's the worst.
Yeah.
Anyways, any reviews you want to go over?
No, since my internet's cooperating really well, let's save those for next week.
Right. All right, then we will thank our patrons real quick, starting with our VIPs. Oh, our RIP of the week. Did we even mention Kitten Clowndozer?
Yeah.
I think we mentioned it.
Yes, Kitten Clowndozer. God, I can't say it. Say it, Jesse. I can't say it.
If you say Clinton's 3 times, they're going to take you out. So don't mess up. All right. Anyways, Kitten Clowndozer, our RIP of the week. Let's thank our VIP, starting with Fix Your Internet, Rob. That's appropriate. Jeremy K, Justin W, J Gooch 725, Jennifer A, Jeremy M, Casey W, Brandina 77, Kathy F, Kitten Clowndozer, RIP of the week. Ghost Nurse JP, just another non-churchy demon. Dave has a new kangaroo onesie with a bottom flap. West Virginia coal miner. Tess, British people are playing. Oh no, I'm sorry. I can't read my own name. British Jesse playing the flute. Yes. If you heard that new flute music in the beginning, I spent way too much time trying to figure out a flute tune. So appreciate that while you have it. Never doing that again. Kate and Steve M, Sharon V, Glitter Tees, Camry from Washington, Kelly C. For those wondering, no, I didn't actually play the flute. I played it on keyboard. I don't know how to play the flute. Kelly C, Nick, Liz Young, Rob's Pre-Show Yoga Dance Club, Inspires Gaming, Allison V, Robert H, Anna C, Jeannie, Mom and Pops W, Father Squatch the Elder, Lisa J, and more disappointing than Plymouth Rock. Thank you so much for being our VIPs. And let's hop into the Warren's Wards, starting with Draw Me Like One of Your French Ghosts, Degenerate Gambler, Voodoo Ghost, who shouldn't have hit on 19, Jamie E, Nick M, T-Cat, Whisper, Jeremy M, Beth C, Apple Steph, Rachel G, Sarah B, Her Lady Spookship, Victim of Ohio, Morgan S, Julie Gooley, Eugene M, Colby Remembers, Kath Q, Chris Connolly, LBPS founder. I'm not the next HTGS guest. Oh, see that? Now he's playing playing reverse psychology with us next week. Look out for him. The other Rachel B, Sarah Cook, Janice G, Marfire, Lily, Anthony T from the 603. Water demons will kill you with 4,000 giggling beaters. Hey, Alexa, can demons get pregnant? That's a good question. And I said it quietly enough where my phone didn't listen to me. Send fan mail to P.O. Box 828 Plymouth, Mass. 02362. That is your Patreon names. Thank you. And Seth on guitar, thank you for being part of the Warren's Wards. And next up, we have the Ghost Pirate Mafia. Let's kick that off with Rob enjoys hot dog ends with soup. Cole to the miscellany. G.O.B. Grim B. D, the Lobster Dancing Banana Land Dinosaur Monster, Susan C, Just Ghostly, Witchy Kitty 416, Karen L, Michael M, Amber R, Brant C, Miss Nardozzi, Shane O'Mac, Joe, Trevor S, Christina S, Kate C, Kelly C, bloop, bloop. My voice cracked a little on that. I'll do it again more clean. Bloop. That's much better.
Now do it in your English accent.
Bloop. Can't catch me off guard. Crazy Legs Cowboys are the worst franchise ever. Miss Macabre, Michelle Duroku, the mad gasser of Methuen. Not Methuen.
The mad gasser of Methuen.
Nice. Mummified Rob slurping mini hot dogs out of a bowl of soup. It's a horrifying image.
Mummified Rob.
D from H-Town, Meta A, Monster Mom 04, Wicked Alley, Dark Snark. Fandom is wanting to be dominated by a female. Wisdom is wanting to be dominated by a wizard. Okay. I read that weird because you didn't put punctuation, and I'm not Christopher Walken. I can't handle that. Megan S, Arcade Hunters, Wayne C, Siri, show me pictures of an incubus, Zach Baggins. Crystal Quinn, aka Not a Rob fan. Thick Boy Freddy's baby mama was definitely yeeted. Alicia E, Thick Boy Freddy, forever mourning our loss of the little ball of hate. I don't know what that means.
What is the little ball of hate?
I almost don't want to know. Probably Thick Boy Freddy's baby mama. I don't know. I'm a cat that fell asleep in the wall and now I'm displayed forever. This sucks. Sam from the Paul, Joe R. Al Capone, Huggy Bear. Great lasagna is great and bad lasagna is bad. Solar Flare, Mariah M. Kira Lee J. And Cody G. Hooply Whooply, Birthday Witch, and Lieutenant Hitchcock Butt Chapel. Nice.
There's a Brad Marchand reference. The little ball of hate.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just hoping that you didn't like lose a child, and that was how you were telling us on Patreon. That's why I kind of approached it cautiously. That is a really rough way to break the news. Well, thank God.
We gave it an unintentional moment of silence.
It was a moment of trying to process all that information at once.
Well, Marshawn leaving Boston deserves a moment of silence, so it's fine.
Shame.
we mustn't forget that everyone in the world hates Marshawn except for people in Boston,
We can hate
including
him
people from Florida, who he's now. That's where he plays now, right? Anyways, anything else, gentlemen?
No, make sure that if you are a $10 or $20 tier on Patreon, you're checking out the monthly content. Got some new content dropping for that this week, I believe. So be on the lookout for that.
Hell yeah. Well, let us know what you thought of the episode. Let us know what you think of the Ancient Ram Inn. And we'll see you guys next time for another episode of Hometown Ghost Stories. You guys have a great night. We love every single one of you. Oh, before we go, actually, let me thank the donos one more time. One more time, big thank you to Brenda C., Lockwood and Company, Papa Squatch, Blow Me in Chicago, and Another Vice for your generous donations. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you so
Have a good
much.
night. Bye now.
Peace.